Bambiz Marketing presents Elder Law Growth, the podcast that helps elder law and estate planning attorneys attract clients without wasting time or money. I'm your host, Amy Hurst. Let's dive in.
We had this conversation with, he's a senior client at one of the biggest law firms in the world. And that was the case there's a lot of pro bono work that he wanted to get done. There are a lot of obviously client relationship work. And he actually did a lot of legal work. And truly his day was very much at the effect of everything that was coming his way. He didn't take time to plan. He didn't intentionally decide how the day would go and genuinely felt that that was the only way to function. And there are no role models that he could see. There were a couple of folks that he would say, well, I think they're better at managing their time, but he didn't know what they did differently. His to-do list kept getting bigger and bigger, and the things that were there on week 1 were there on week 10, and nothing, like they just kept getting pushed from week 1 to 2 to 3 without any execution on them. And so having him work on that mindset and the strategy around how to plan and how to actually follow through was life-changing.
That was Monica Levi, the self-discipline coach and lawyer. She's here to share her incredible story of how self-discipline, the art of self-discipline, saved her in her time of struggle. Monica's story is one of inspiration and is proof that self-discipline trumps talents or even motivation, because motivation can steam out. It's through the art of discipline and disciplining ourselves that we can reach our goals successfully. But how do we harness the power of self-discipline? How do we even get there? Monica is going to share that and so much more in this podcast episode. Let's dive in.
When I quit practicing law, when I eventually started my own business, I had to switch from an employee mentality to a business owner mentality, which was the unexpected challenge for me. I had all the strategies of how to build a business, how to get clients, what to do strategically, but I was not prepared for that. How do I spend my time kind of change and mindset change? And so I had gone from being very structured and good at meeting deadlines and having a pretty tight timeline and getting it all done to having a completely open schedule that I had to decide how to fill and prioritize and what's important and how do I stick to that schedule. And so I had been self-disciplined all my life, but this was a very different playground for me. And so when I found myself struggling with how do I spend my time? How do I know how much time to dedicate to everything that was new to me? And so I was fighting this in the first few months. I was like, I'm not feeling productive. I'm not sure that I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm dedicating the right amount of time to the right activities. I had to step back and think about, okay, what do I know about self-discipline? And because I'd never intentionally learned that it was something that I'd grown up pretty good at, being good at self-discipline, I had to reverse engineer. Like, how do you build self-discipline in a new area of your life? And so in this case, it was sort of being a business owner. And so I came up with my process and applied it to how I spent time, moving from being an attorney at a law firm to owning a business and having that shift. And so applying that skill that led to productivity, time management, not procrastinating, not following distractions, and just really being in control of my time as opposed to being very reactive to what came my way.
So instead of being reactive, you were proactive. How are you able to be proactive about it? Did you just sit down? You're like, okay, this is my entire day and I need to do this, this, and this, and this, and that.
Many lawyers feel it's wasteful to take time to sit down and plan because there is not a tangible outcome at the end of that time. So it feels like I don't have time to plan. And so I help them see how backwards that belief is that's preventing them from like taking the 30 minutes to create a very proactive time, intentional time for their week instead of being reactive to everything that's coming their way. And so I'd say that deciding ahead of time is at the core of self-discipline. When we decide ahead of time, we use the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is the higher functioning part of the brain, to decide what we want to do that is aligned with our long-term goals. When we don't decide ahead of time, when we wait until the time to take action to make that decision, we're very impulsive and very reactive. And so that comes down to anything, exercise, how you spend your time at work. And so that small amount of time to decide ahead of time is critically important and pays off in spades. And so, yes. So what I'm saying is, yes, you do plan ahead of time. You plan ahead of time as much as you can. So, for example, you have the whole week ahead, the client meetings, the appointments that are already plugged in, and then you fill in the gaps of your days with everything else that you want to get done. And then the hard part is actually holding yourself to that schedule and following through.
The accountability.
The accountability and the ability to feel the discomfort of doing something that you probably don't want to do in the moment, the ability to resist the distraction of doing something easier that will get you the dopamine hit of doing something, but it's not actually what you set to do at that time. So there's so many components to why we procrastinate and distractions and following through. But planning ahead of time is non-negotiable.
And as the self-discipline coach, I can just imagine probably one of the top questions that people come to you with is the topic of procrastination. How do we battle that when it's like, okay, I'm just going to put it off. I'm just going to put it off. I'm just going to put it off.
It's certainly very common, and there are two reasons why we procrastinate. Either because we have a thought about the task that is unpleasant, or there's a feeling associated with the task that we're trying to avoid. So what I mean by this is either we're thinking, this is overwhelming, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to begin, I don't know how, I may not be good at this. We have a thought associated with the task that is creating resistance to getting started. Or there's a feeling associated with it, again, discomfort or fear of being judged because we may not be perfect at the task. So once you're able to identify what is it that's creating the resistance, because clearly you've put this on your schedule, or this is something that you want to get done, but you're not getting going at the time you plan, if you're able to identify what's causing the resistance, you can then question it in the moment and take a little bit of agency over that primitive brain that's telling you, oh, no, this is too hard. Most of the time, we're very subconsciously reactive to our feelings and thoughts. They're creating the resistance that causes us to procrastinate. And we don't gain agency to decide, I'm going to choose to think differently about this because I do want to get it done. So if I'm overwhelmed, can I tell myself that I just have to get started with the first step? Can I break down the big task into smaller chunks and give myself that motivation that I know how to do, that I can only do one step at a time? Or if you are procrastinating because of perfectionism, which is very common, again, examine the thought that is creating that resistance and question it, and find a way to think about the task in a way that creates the desire or motivation to take action.
So it sounds like self-awareness is absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. And the way to catch yourself procrastinating is if you have a schedule ahead of time, you can tell yourself, okay, if it's 2 p.m. and I'm supposed to be doing this task, but I'm deciding to check my email, you know that you're procrastinating. If you don't have a schedule, then you don't know that you're procrastinating because everything is sort of like a free-for-all as to how you spend your time.
And I'm remembering all of the stories of the attorneys who listen and our clients. They face distractions all day, especially with the elder law attorneys when people are calling and saying, hey, I need help my parents need to be in the dementia care. I need help right now.
This is the number one objection I get from clients, lawyers, who will say, I have to be reactive because there are things coming at me all day and I'm in a client service business and clients are calling. Yeah. And there's a great solution I have for that. I can't go into too much detail, but if you're allowing that to be the excuse that drives how you spend your time, you will always be reactive. And that's just not sustainable to feel like you're in control of your time.
So there's a way to overcome it.
100%. Yes.
100%. And that's the number one objection that you're getting from attorneys. They're saying, well, no, I have to be reactive.
Well, they just feel that they're not in control of their time because of the nature of the business, that they have to serve clients and respond to when clients need them. And that is just an excuse that feels very socialized and validated in the industry. And so we just throw our hands up and say, well, there's nothing I can do.
Right. That is the culture. Yes, I need to be reactive. Yes, I need to be open to all of these bombs that come in. And that is the culture of being an attorney. They have to deal with so much, all of the surprises. For the listeners here today who do feel that they have to be reactive.
If you think I have to always be at the effect of phone calls and, texts and clients needing me, you will obviously create that reality for yourself. But let's just say you're in a client meeting and then another client is calling you, you're not going to pick up. So there is an amount of time that's acceptable for you not to be available. You cannot be constantly picking up phone calls and responding to emails. That is very distractive in the sense that you're completely changing focus from one task to the next as you are, let's just say you're sitting down to write and phone calls are coming in. That changing of tasks, it's proven that it takes 23 minutes to get back to the same amount of focus that you had once you're interrupted. So it's very costly to keep shifting focus. So what I recommend is you can batch your time, and let's just say from 10 to 11, you have focus time, you're not picking up the phone, you're not looking at notifications. Nothing happens if someone calls you during that time and you don't respond. You're not supposed to be constantly available. You're not a call center. And then you can have, on the every 10 minutes every hour of checking incoming emails and messages and deciding what's urgent, what needs to be responded to. But if you know that you're going to get to your clients within the business day, that's normal within the industry standard. So you can block focus time and completely block off notifications and increase your focus, you increase your productivity and your impact, and be at peace that whatever comes throughout that time will be heeded to during your communication batch time. So that's one way you can counteract that need to be responsive at all times. But it feels good to be responsive, and we had a dopamine hit. And so it's very easy to tell yourself, no, I have to. It feels good to be needed. And so some of us just like that constant notification being on.
The initial thought is it feels good to feel needed, but it's extremely exhausting.
Yeah, there's a high price. We had this conversation with, he's a senior client at one of the biggest law firms in the world. And that was the case there's a lot of pro bono work that he wanted to get done. There are a lot of obviously client relationship work. And he actually did a lot of legal work. And truly his day was very much at the effect of everything that was coming his way. He didn't take time to plan. He didn't intentionally decide how the day would go, and genuinely felt that that was the only way to function. And there are no role models that he could see. There were a couple of folks that he would say, well, I think they're better at managing their time, but he didn't know what they did differently. His to-do list kept getting bigger and bigger, and the things that were there on week 1 were there on week 10. And nothing, like they just kept getting pushed from week 1 to 2 to 3 without any execution on them. And so having him work on that mindset and the strategy around how to plan and how to actually follow through was life-changing.
That's incredible. When you were saying that his workload just kept piling up and kept piling up, month 1, 2, 3, and you were able to go in there and help him batch things. So obviously the transformation for him is that he was able to actually not keep piling things up. He was able to manage everything.
Mm-hmm. And bring more business. A lot of us rely on motivation to do the things we don't want to do. And motivation works only some of the time. So if we rely on motivation, we will show up to do the thing, but only when we have motivation, not consistently, because motivation is limited. And so if you are, and you use it up throughout the day. So if you are using your motivation not to yell at your kids or be mean to a client who's being, unreasonable, by the time you get home, you have no motivation left. So you won't be doing the workout that you planned to, or you won't be able to resist the bag of chips or the third glass of wine that you don't want to consume. And I'm using this example applied to anything. If we use motivation to accomplish our goals, we will not show up consistently because we'll use it up on some days faster than other days. But when you have self-discipline, you don't need motivation. You just do what you plan to do. You don't negotiate, you don't think about it. And that's the beauty and the power of self-discipline versus motivation. Because if you go on a diet, you use motivation, a couple of times you'll be able to succeed, and then a couple of times you won't be able to. So that inconsistency will derail you or will get you to quit because you're not going to be able to see the results. With the self-discipline, none of that happens, right? You are showing up consistently no matter how you feel or what else is happening. And it is the big distinction that is missed because many of us think that we need willpower.
Motivation and willpower. Most of us think that's what we need. Like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
but that steam can blow out so fast.
Yes, yes. I think willpower is amazing, and some of us have more than others, but yet it's not enough to sustain you to get to your ultimate end result.
And self-discipline kind of takes all of that out and keeps you consistent.
Yes.
I love that. I'm curious, Monica, if you'd be willing to share your story about how self-discipline came about for you.
That's an interesting question because I don't necessarily know. I grew up in Bulgaria during communism. We had a lot of, we had to do without. So we had days without electricity and days without water and food stamps and things that we didn't have a lot of. And so I naturally had to build the self-discipline to do it out, or to know, to experience discomfort and to be okay with it, to plan ahead of time, to not negotiate with myself, because the circumstances kind of forced me into it. And now in retrospect, I'm so grateful that it became an innate quality for me that I've sort of used out throughout my life. But I do believe that self-discipline is a skill anyone can build. It's not something you're born with necessarily. Some people certainly develop it perhaps circumstantially, or they have through the way they grew up in their parents, with their in the background that they come from. But it's not necessary that you grow up with self-discipline. It is absolutely a skill we can all develop.
I think that's so encouraging, Monica, that no matter how old we are, we don't need to have that natural skill and we can build it ourselves.
Absolutely.
There was something else that you mentioned about how strategy, is this what you were meaning about how motivation doesn't really get you very far? Because I know you were saying strategy is just a small key to succeeding.
Yeah. So this is commonly misunderstood. So as lawyers, we love to research and to learn. And when we try to learn a new skill or create a new business, we go and get all the strategy and we feel really good consuming, reading, researching. But strategy is a very small part, and I'd say the easiest part of any success process, because we have podcasts and YouTube and books, and you can get the strategy fairly easily, even for free. But what we don't do then is execute on that strategy, because when you think about it, we all know how to lose weight, and yet many of us struggle with weight. So the strategy of the how to is there, but what we fail to do is follow through and apply the strategy. So when we get the first piece, we feel great. Oh, I have the strategy. We try it a few times. It doesn't produce what we want. And then we decide it's the strategy that's not working. We give up. We go looking for the next strategy. But all we're doing is restarting the clock, because we're not disciplined enough to take the strategy forward. And so sometimes when clients come to me to work on productivity, they've read all the books, they have all the strategies, and they'll tell me like, I know this and this and this, but they have not taken, and I would say to them, to pick any strategy. It doesn't really matter. They all work if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to feel the discomfort of applying the strategy, because it will be uncomfortable, because you are changing your default practices. And so what we do is we take the strategy, we're excited, we apply it for a few weeks, and then we don't see immediate results, and we revert back to the default that we know, because it feels more comfortable, even if it's unproductive. And then we decide that's the strategy didn't work. And a few weeks later, we decide to go and find another strategy, because that consumption of knowledge feels very productive and very comfortable. But in the execution is where we fail, because that's where the change process is uncomfortable. So I'd say for the most part, pick the strategy that you get to first, but stick with it. Don't restart the clock by going for the next strategy and the next one. That's not the problem. The problem is that you're not sticking with the execution.
But that's so hard though.
100%. Change is hard, which is why your why has to be strong enough. So there's 5 phases to any change process. The first one is when we are highly motivated, we're excited, we start taking action. In the second stage, perhaps we see some minor results from our action, we're excited and keep going. The third stage is where most of us quit, because that's where we either plateau, or the same amount of action is no longer producing the same results. We may even take a step back. And that's where your excuses will become very loud. And you may feel yourself telling yourself that maybe you don't want this goal well enough, or maybe your status quo isn't as painful. Your excuses will start overpowering the ability to take action. And that's most of us quit. But if you can expect that part of the change process and anticipate it and not make it mean that you should quit. You're just like, okay, I know this is going to happen. I know that I'll plateau. I know that I will feel uncomfortable, and I just have to keep taking the action. You will get through to the other side where you will again start seeing actions, and your actions will compile and compound into results until you get to the final stage where you have the habit of this action, and you have the discipline. You no longer have to feel the discomfort with taking action. But the third stage is where most of us give up.
Expecting that plateau is crucial.
Yes, making it be normal, not taking it as a sign to quit, deciding how you will support yourself through it. It's almost like knowing that, visualizing it, this will happen when I get to this stage, and that's a normal part of the process. I'm not going to get discouraged. Kind of anticipating it, visualizing it mentally, and having a plan for how you get through it.
Being able to be that prepared to get through that third stage.
Yeah, because at that time it's pure mindset. The strategy stays the same. You just have to overcome the excuses.
I love that. That is powerful stuff, Monica. So you are a coach and you help lawyers. Is there a newsletter that you'd like them to sign up to, or find you on LinkedIn? Because that's how I found you. So.
Oh, great. Oh, that's neat. Yes, I'm active on several platforms. So LinkedIn at Monica Levi, Levi, and Instagram, the Self-Discipline Coach. And on both platforms, I share daily tips on how to build your self-discipline. I have a newsletter, which is free again, and you can sign up for it on my Instagram page, on my website. You can find it many places, and my website is monicalevicoaching.com. And I have a number of free resources, both on my website and through Instagram, on self-discipline, on building habits. So if you're curious and want to do this work, you can find me on one of the platforms on my website. And if you want to take this work further, I work with clients one-on-one and with in a group setting. So certainly there are options for everyone. I do a free call with prospective clients to talk about how this can work for them and answer their specific questions and see if I can help with their particular challenge. So this is a highly customized approach. So yeah, it will be time well spent if you want to explore working together. Thank you for having me on. So excited. I love talking to lawyers, and I feel that we have a very interesting way of thinking and how we're taught to analyze, which could be beneficial and in some cases work against us. This is truly the case with every single client. They come in with that mindset that they have to be reactive, and the higher up they are, especially if they're senior partners, that's all they do. They don't do as much legal work as much as they do client work, and meaning client relationship work, and they feel exhausted by the end of the day. And so when I show them how they can batch their time, how they can think differently, how they can plan ahead and be in control, everything shifts. And so they are more profitable, they have more free time, they're less stressed, and it's the same amount of work that they have, right? But they just think about it differently and execute differently.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Elder Law Growth Podcast, the place to be for all things marketing for elder law and estate planning law firms. If you liked this podcast, please leave us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. If you'd like to outsource your marketing to our team, go to bambiz.net and book a free call with us today.